Good evening and welcome to our Wednesday night webinar. My name is Margaret, and if you're joining us tonight, go ahead and let us know where you are from and your name. So if you're joining our call tonight, please let us know where you're from and what your name is. And we welcome you to our Wednesday night webinar on why carbs are not the enemy. So I'll give everyone just a quick minute to join up. We're excited to have you and be able to share this information about performance nutrition with you. So I look forward to seeing who joins us, and go ahead and let us know your name and where you are from. Thank you. And my name is Margaret Downs. I am a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and also board certified in sports nutrition. I want to welcome you to tonight's topic, which is why our carbs are not the enemy. And this is a common misconception among many athletes. And so we're here to deliver just some pretty straightforward and specific information about carbohydrates and how they benefit your athletic performance, and how to dispel some of the myths that may be surrounding this topic. So welcome, and we'll go ahead and get started. So why our carbs are not the enemy? So my name is Margaret. Again, I am a registered dietitian. I'm board certified in sports as a certified sports specialist in sports nutrition or dietetics. And as you can see, this is a little bit about my work history. I've really worked with all different populations throughout the life cycle in sport. And this represents all sports and really all levels of play. I've worked in professional sport with the Chicago White Sox in the minor league division of baseball for 2 seasons recently. I was a faculty member at Western Carolina University and worked in collegiate athletics with approximately a 400 athlete program with 14 different sports. And I have a sports background with collegiate volleyball and with a 400-meter runner. So I was also a dancer all the way through college and minored in dance. So what are some of these carbohydrate myths that we encounter and hear a lot about in the media, and things that really tend to confuse clients that I work with and that we work with on an ongoing basis? Our carbohydrate are, just not good food choices, and that they are going to cause you to store more fat or make you fat from eating them, or that they're fine. Just don't consume them after this certain time of day. And so really putting time constraints on when they should be consumed and how often. We also hear a common misconception among athletes that proteins are more important than carbohydrate. And so you're better off just to eat higher amounts of meat or high protein sources. And we also hear a lot that there's just too much sugar in carbs, or that all carbohydrates are made up of is sugar. And so we want to kind of take each one of these myths and drill down into what are some of the facts and what does the science say. So what we're going to learn tonight is a little bit why carbohydrates are so important, especially for people who are highly active and in sports. What are they? Where do they come from? And what sources of food are they found in? So that we can give you some specific direction on what kinds of foods to eat to be most beneficial. And then how do athletes use carbohydrates for fuel, specifically to meet performance goals? So how can we work them in before, during, and after our exercise bouts to ensure that we're getting enough of them in the right amounts and from the best sources? So first of all, why do we need them? What is it about carbohydrates that are so important? And what is all of this talk about? So Carbohydrates are definitely one of 6 classes of nutrients, and 3 of them contain energy, and carbohydrates is one of those fuel sources. So we have carbohydrate, protein, and fat that contain energy, and then we have vitamins and minerals that are structural and functional, and water, of course, that makes up anywhere from 60 to 70% of our total body weight. And that is also really dependent on how much lean mass we have. And so the more lean mass, the better fluid retention that you'll have inside those muscle cells. So, or muscle tissue. So it's really important to see that water weight can fluctuate based on lean mass as well. Every time we store carbohydrate, we store a little bit of fluid. So that is also something that we see kind of go in conjunction with relationship to body weight and how much fuel we can store inside those working muscles. But they are definitely needed as fuel, as energy, and they supply the body with this energy as one of the 3 macronutrients, being carbohydrate, protein, and fat. Then we also see that we break these carbohydrates down when we eat them into what's called glucose, and this is our body's blood sugar. And glucose is stored in our body in muscle and liver tissue, but then it is also in our bloodstream. And so the glucose is this usable source of carbohydrate for every living cell in our body. And it supplies our muscles, tissues, and brain with the energy to properly function. So critical component of our overall health and wellness and energy dynamics and systems within our body. And then the amount or the intake amount that we eat is really going to vary depending on physical activity. But this is also really going to become more substantial with the amount of exercise that we get, the type of exercise, and or the stage of performance that we're in. So this is really going to be dependent on how physically active a person is. And the more physically active, the more carbohydrate they're going to require. So we kind of break carbs down into 2 classes. One is simple, one is complex. This seems pretty straightforward, but then there is still a lot of confusion out there around this topic, and mainly because we see different rates of absorption between simple and complex carbohydrates, meaning if we had a tablespoon of sugar, it's going to digest more rapidly than if we eat a more complex food source that has added fiber and nutrients and food structure and composition to it. And so the digestibility of these foods is quite different. We also see that simple carbohydrates tend to be more processed, or what you hear as refined, whereas they've had a lot of the major vitamin and mineral constitution of the food either stripped out through processing. Sometimes it's, added back to the food, and it's enriched back into the food, or we see it kind of being void of certain natural nutrients that we would find in more complex sources. Complex sources are definitely higher in nutritional value. They're going to contain an abundance of vitamins and minerals and fiber, which helps to fill our stomach up. It also helps with our gastrointestinal tract and our gut health and our gut microbiota. And so having this kind of fibrous substrate in your plant-based foods is also a really great way to achieve gut health. The more variety that we have in those food choices, the better. And fiber is one of those components of our diet that also helps with weight management. But for an athlete, it can also be something that can cause GI distress depending on when we eat it. So timing of these foods is so critical to an athlete, and when they decide to eat carbohydrates and in what form can really be a game changer as far as their overall performance during competitive events and training. So it's really important to train your body how to use carbohydrate by practicing with different forms and seeing what suits your body the best in your specific sport, and to help with your specific GI response or gastrointestinal response. So We do see some very distinct differences between the classes of carbohydrates. That being said, we can always find good choices depending on the timing. So here you see some examples of the types of foods that we might encounter that would be considered classes of carbs. We really have 4 main food groups that draw from this macronutrient source. One is our whole grains and our starches, as they're called, or starchy vegetables. We also have fruits, dairy, and then, of course, sugar, or sources of simple carbohydrates that would contain more sugar, that may involve processed foods as well. So here you see some examples of fruit. You see a yogurt, which is a dairy class, cereal, and milk, which are both carbohydrate sources. And so there you can see that gram amount is higher than just eating yogurt alone, or just eating a granola bar, for example. It's almost double the amount of a granola bar. And so depending on the type of cereal, or whether or not it contains added sugars, dried fruits, or other sources of carbohydrate that increase its overall carbohydrate load. And so you can see some variations in the grams here. One serving is typically 15 grams, but when we're working with athletes, you can see that we're really looking for concentrated sources, because the more active individual that you are, the more energy your body is going to require in the form of this macronutrient of carbs. And so we do look for condensed choices when we're working with athletes. And so we want to get more bang for our buck. And it's easier to eat foods that may have a higher concentration of carbohydrates for a similar volume of food that you would get just in a plain cereal that didn't contain dried fruit or other sources of added carbs. So here you can see some good examples of the carbohydrate content in various foods. Bagels will also vary depending on the size of the bagel. And in this example, we're talking more of like a 4-ounce bagel as opposed to a 2-ounce. And so you can see the variation in grams based on that portion size as well. So here we see some whole grains listed up top, brown rice and oats being very similar. Brown rice is definitely a concentrated source of carbohydrate, and half a cup would get 26 grams. And it's comparative to a cup of oats, which is really like 2 servings of oatmeal, but you can see the gram concentration is very similar, and you have to eat less volume with the rice. So you're not having to eat as much. And so this can be beneficial for athletes who are highly active, because they're getting a higher concentration in a smaller amount of food. This is not only easier for them at times because they're always on the go, but it can also be beneficial in the sense that it contains a lot of nutrients and fiber as well. We see the cup of whole grain pasta. Again, similarly, we see a high concentrated amount in the brown rice versus the whole grain pasta, but we're still seeing, a nice concentrated source there. Avocado, which is really a plant-based fat, we do see a little bit of carbohydrate in, and then you see some examples of broccoli compared to sweet potato, for example, or chickpeas, which are considered to be starchy vegetables. One medium sweet potato is approximately going to be 3 to 4 ounces in weight. And this is just showing you kind of eyes look at how many grams are in what would be considered to be an approximate serving. You can see dried fruits are a very concentrated source of carbohydrates. So in half a cup of dried apricots, you're getting approximately 40 grams. So if we're looking to increase the carbohydrate content of the diet, that can be a useful reference to help you understand how to find more concentrated sources. So how does our body use these macronutrients? And this is really step-by-step kind of breakdown of what goes on. And our carbohydrate digestion really starts in our mouth. And so the minute we start chewing our food, which is why our teeth are so vitally important to our nutritional well-being, is because they help to break down our food. And that starts when we start chewing and we release saliva into the mouth. And that's where these digestive enzymes or catalysts that start breaking down our foods are really, that process really begins. And after we chew and we masticate our food well, which is supposed to be around 20 bites per, or 20 chews per bite. So you're really chewing 20 times before you swallow. We see that now it's in a form that can travel down fairly easily through the esophagus, which is the pipe connecting your throat to your stomach. And then it closes off there, it goes into the stomach, and that's where we release hydrochloric acid as well as more digestive enzymes. And we break this food down from little boluses that we're swallowing into what we call a kind of a different substance, which is called chyme. And as we break down our food into our stomach, it becomes very well mixed. So then it moves into the small intestines, where this substance is now broken down into these very small and single units in the small intestines. And this is where we absorb this food substrate or food substance into our blood. And it has to be in the form of glucose to travel in the bloodstream. So we see our body, when it gets the signal that there's glucose in the bloodstream, then we have a message that goes to the pancreas to increase secretion of the hormone insulin. And that is what signals our cell to want to uptake glucose, and insulin helps to drive that glucose into our body cells. And this happens in our tissues and our muscles and even across our blood-brain barrier. So we see our muscle cells use glucose for short bursts of energy, of exercise, and for longer durations of activity. It's also sent to the liver, and it can be stored as fat if it's not needed for our energetic pathways right away. So a little bit about carbohydrate timing, and this is a really great way to kind of start out understanding how to apply carbohydrate before exercise, during, and post. And so we really want to think about the length of the activity that we're going into. If it's over 60 to 90 minutes, then we're really trying to supplement carbohydrate during an activity. But outside of that, if it's a really high intense activity and or it's going to last for a while, we want to make sure that we're intaking carbohydrate 3 to 4 hours prior to, and we want to get a really good balance of complex carbohydrates around other proteins and plant-based fats prior to an event. So a very well-balanced meal, in other words. The closer we get into that activity, a complex carbohydrate can certainly help, especially if it's 1 to 2 hours prior to. And we're looking for things that can really, also provide a good amount of nutrition, but or vitamin and mineral content, but also a good amount of energy. We're going to see simple carbohydrates being preferred the closer we get to the event or the training session. And this is a very important, part of training that we really need to take care of in practice. We don't want to try anything new when we're going into a competitive event. We really want to know what to expect from our bodies. And so practice really makes perfect with respect to applying carbohydrate that close into an event. Eating simple carbohydrates too close to an event can cause reactive hypoglycemia or can cause your blood sugar to get low if you increase exercise rapidly in a very high intensity after eating simple carbs. So something just to look out for in training. And then post-exercise, you see that we're refueling pretty quickly. We're aiming for certain amounts here based on kilograms of body weight, which is just your body weight divided by 2.2. So if I'm if I'm a 150-pound female, then you just want to take that 150 and you want to divide it by 2.2. And that's going to tell you that we need 68 kilograms of body weight. And then you're going to apply these guidelines based on that adjustment in body weight. Here we see the amount of carbohydrate that we need based on the sport type and the intensity level of the athlete. So these are just some examples of low intensity, moderate intensity, or high intensity activities. And here you see the amount of carbohydrate that would be needed based on that particular type of sport throughout the day. So this would be overall carbohydrate for performance fuel and recovery. Now, if we're calculating carbohydrate requirements for individuals, we really want to think about, number one, how many calories are going to be needed for this particular individual. And then we want to understand how many calories are in a gram of carbohydrate. So 1 calorie equals 4 grams of carbohydrate. So if you take an athlete who needs 2,500 calories a day, we want to give them 50% approximately of their intake from carbohydrate. And if we do that, we would just say, well, what is the overall energy consumption divided by 2? Because that's 50%. And that would be approximately 1,250 calories. And then if we know that there's 4 calories of carbohydrates in every gram, then we would just divide 1,250 calories divided by 4. And that's going to give you 312, 313 grams of carbohydrate per day. Now, we would then kind of just balance it out based on how many meals a day this person is eating, what kind of sources of carbohydrate are they consuming, and then we can kind of make those adjustments based on what they actually need. So this is a good example of, say, what we would expect someone to be eating on approximately a 2,000 calorie a day meal plan. This would be breakfast, lunch, pre, post workout, and then dinner. And it gives you some good examples of approximately how many grams of carbohydrate would be available in each meal and what those sources would be in this example. And so we see those oats, dried fruit or apricots at breakfast, for a total of 45 grams. We see at lunch, we've got medium sweet potato and broccoli being a non-starchy vegetable, which is why it's so low. And then a pre-workout, we have a banana, which is equivalent to approximately 2 servings of fruit. We have a post-workout shake, which has a little bit of carbohydrate in the protein powder being consumed, but we also have 3/4 cups of frozen fruit, which is equivalent to 3 servings of fruit here. And you can see that's a very concentrated source. And 1 cup of milk, which is approximately a serving. And then we see the brown rice, lentils, again, vegetables, and we see chopped salad at the very end here with about 15 grams combined with a salad. Now, non-starchy vegetables are going to be less condensed in carbohydrate, but they are going to contain a little bit. We just have to eat more of them to get to the same level as a whole grain or a fruit or something of that nature. So when we look at a couple of case studies, we just want to look at a couple of examples here. We have a 21-year-old male. He's a basketball player. He consumes 3,500 calories a day. He's 6 feet and he is 92 kilograms. Typically has about 8 ounces of sports drink and about 15 minutes before his practice. But he's not sure if he's consuming enough carbohydrate before practice and throughout the day. And so we see if you're looking here, and I will get to your questions in just a moment. If we're looking at this person and he's 92 kilograms, is he eating enough carbohydrates before practice? And it's kind of this simple, textbook answer. In this case, we're just kind of going based on what we would see. What is the calculation, so to speak, of getting enough? And if we look back just a couple of slides at how much carbohydrate we need per kilogram, and this person is a basketball player, so we look at his sport, right? What type of sport is this? We are going to see well, it's not going to let me go back, but he needs approximately 0.25 grams per kilogram. So if I take 0.25 and I multiply that by 92, he's going to need about 23 grams before practice. So you can see he is under fueling to some degree, and he needs just a slightly more than that prior to. And if he's going in it so soon, so he's only 15 minutes prior to practice, we're definitely going to see the situation that he's going to need some more simple carbohydrates. We definitely don't want to be eating too much simple sugar at this point, but a little bit is going to kind of top off his blood levels of glucose. It's going to be digested very quickly and available for energy utilization going into this practice or event. So it can be done. Again, we don't like to get athletes into situations where they're fueling, so close into a competitive event, especially if it's a technique they haven't tried and practiced repetitively, and we know that their body is going to respond as it's kind of acclimates to the way that you train it. So we want to kind of stick with our training regimens. But he needs a little bit more than that. And if we're looking at energy levels throughout the day, we really want to look at what is the total broad amount of carbohydrate that this athlete would need. And for this type of activity, it would probably be somewhere in the 5 to 7 grams per kilo, or 6 to 9, depending on the time of year and, exactly how often and how much he's practicing throughout the day. I did have a little question that I'll address. It's, will complex carbohydrates cause GI distress if it's consumed in a pregame meal? And not necessarily. I would say that the answer to that is really going to depend on number one, the individual. So, their tolerance level and how far out prior to the game that they're considering to take in a higher fiber source or a more complex type of food source, because your body is going to take longer to break that down. But, usually most fruits are well tolerated, and sources of, kind of refined carbs that aren't as high in fiber or whole grains can be better tolerated going into pregame. So when we look at this next example here of a case study, we're going to see this 18-year-old female, and she's a cross-country athlete. She's working out at high intensity, weighs 56 kilograms, which if you take her body weight at 56 and you multiply that by 2.2, she weighs about 123 pounds. She's eating 450 grams of carbs per day. And she eats mainly these cookies, crackers, and processed carbs, which are definitely more simple carbohydrate in nature that she's consuming. But she's still feeling tired during practice, and especially on days when she's got longer runs. And so is she eating enough? Does she need to increase her carbohydrate intake? Now, technically speaking, if someone is on this high intensity athletic range, then they're needing 9 to 12 grams of carbohydrate per day. And if we take 56 and we multiply it by 9, we can see the low end of her carbohydrate requirements around 500. The high end of her carbohydrate intake at 12 grams per kilo per day would be closer to 670. So you can see she seems to be under fueling a little bit, but the larger problem is because she's still at 450 grams a day, she's still at 90% of her carbohydrate requirements, meaning she's eating 90% of what her body needs at that 500 gram level, or 9 grams per kilo per day. And that is really close. So she's not necessarily under fueling, but what we're seeing her do is eat less nutritious choices. So she's eating things that are simple carbohydrate in nature. They're going to be more rapidly absorbed. They're not going to provide her as much sustainable fuel throughout the day. And she's going to end up feeling more tired because her body just is not fueled for the long haul. She often complains about being tired during practice. So again, this is speaking more to her pre-fueling techniques and maybe even what she's doing throughout her training bout. And then we see, well, how many grams does she need? So I kind of walked you through that, but 9 to 12 for a high intensity type of athlete. And then what types of carbs could she eat prior to? And of course, we recommend getting really in 2 to 4 hours advanced of her practice or her competition and really focusing on more complex sources that are also definitely concentrated sources, things that are going to provide more carbohydrate for less volume of food so that she doesn't feel like she's having to eat all the time and she's not getting worn out just from the amount of food that she's having to consume. So in review, make sure to consume enough carbs throughout the day. You want to make sure you're maintaining energy and supporting the activity level that your body is demanding. Make sure you do consult a dietitian if you're not sure about what you need. We can certainly supply those services. Complex carbs should be eaten hours before and simple carbohydrates within a closer time frame to your intended activity or competition. And don't forget to pack things post exercise to aid in your recovery and also replenish your muscle stores of glycogen, which is glucose that's stored in the muscle and the liver. So what are some of the frequently asked questions and things to ponder and think about? What are some quick and easy, simple carbs to eat prior to your physical activity? What are some complex carbohydrates to eat throughout the day to maintain energy levels? And how do you know if you're getting enough? And so these are some really good questions. You can find a lot of answers to these questions at mysportsd.com. Make sure to come check out all the resources that we have and the ways that you can integrate with our team and our resources that are going to help you be a better coach, better trainer, better athlete, and a better sports dietitian. So you're going to know if you're eating enough based on how you feel. So what is next? We've got carbohydrate snack and meal ideas, portion sizes, carbohydrate timing, and how to calculate your requirements. If you want information about how to access more related to this topic, please scan that QR code and come visit us at mysportsrd or mysportsd.com. We really do appreciate you coming into our webinar this evening and joining us. We thank you for your participation. And just remember, it's not the will to win that matters. Everyone has that. It's the will to prepare to win that matters. And this is really what's going to differentiate one athlete from the next, and a winner and a winning athlete from someone who's still struggling is the preparation factor with respect to nutrition. It is a foundational practice that can really make the difference in someone's overall athletic performance. And we look forward to being able to help athletes win. You can see we do offer personalized, affordable, and proven results through our one-on-one sports nutrition coaching programs. We can really work with athletes in a multitude of different ways, managing weight, meal planning, daily strategies to help with goal attainment, supplementing protocols that work specifically for those individuals. And we have weekly check-ins. So if you're interested in our personalized, affordable, and proven plans, please, again, you can come into mysportsd.com. You want to start today, don't delay, and come see what great resources that we have available for you. We thank you very much for your time, for your participation, your interest in this topic. And if we can answer any questions for you, I'll be happy to take them at this time. You can either write them in the chat, or you can certainly come back and ask some others. So I have a couple of people who asked about the recording. Yes, we do record the webinars and they will be made available for you. So you can certainly, take advantage of the recordings that we do have for you. And then as far as fiber, pre-game or pre-event, again, this is a very individualized question, but when you think about the total amount of fiber you need in a day, which is around 25 to 30 grams, females being on the little bit of the lower end compared to males, you want to make sure that you're just not overdoing it, because one of the things that happens when your body gets revved up into physical activity is that all the blood goes from your digestive tract out to your working muscles. And so as we're getting prepared for physical activity, all that blood flow is going out to supply our working muscles with fuel. And we're not able to digest our food as effectively or efficiently. And that's what really that's what really happens with our digestion pre-exercise, is it just takes, more of your overall gastrointestinal capability. So I would just say, if you get into a close range of your activity within an hour, I would just stay away from fiber altogether. And then just use more simple sources of carbs. Don't overdo it, because you can run into reactive hypoglycemia, but then, really just trying to make sure that you're eating adequate amount of fiber for a healthy diet, which would be 25 to 30 grams a day. Avoiding those, pre-workout phases where it can become disruptive and uncomfortable, leading to just nausea and potentially vomiting and just not feeling well during practice or events. So if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you for those of you that have opened up a few questions about the content. And I don't see anything else coming in. So we really do thank you for being part of our webinar this evening. And yes, you can look for the recorded session coming out for you. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, then I will end here, and we'll see you guys on the next round. Thanks so much.